समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
I bring you this episode of Cut the Clutter from Mumbai. In fact, from Powai in Mumbai, you see the lake behind me. But we are not talking about either Mumbai or Maharashtra politics. We are taking you very, very far away, as far as possible. Country is so small at 21,000 square kilometers that it is smaller than Meghalaya, smaller than Manipur. It's about the same size as, say, Mizoram, about 21,000 square kilometers with 6.3 million population. 6.3 million estimated. The census of 2024 was just 6 million. It's El Salvador. So why are we talking about El Salvador of all places in Cut the Clutter today? Because if you've seen visuals coming out of the White House last night, Indian time, and you will see them on your screen also, this young leader, 43 years old, two young leaders of some consequence have visited the White House lately since Donald Trump took over. One was Volodymyr Zelensky, again dressed informally as this one is. This one has a jacket, but otherwise is quite informal. For him, it's his style and is appreciated like that in the White House, and he is lionized. For the other one, it was considered an impropriety and he was humiliated in the White House. Everything the other one said was contradicted, and he was shouted down, and he was given a lecture, a rude lecture by J.D. Vance in the Oval House on camera. In the case of this one, everything he says, Donald Trump actually hangs on to, latches on to, and you can see Donald Trump actually sitting there like a fanboy. This 43-year-old leader is Nayib Bukele. Nayib Bukele is the leader of El Salvador, elected leader of El Salvador, elected for the second time. However, therein lies a story, and that is where the idea of autocratic democracy or illiberal democracy comes in, because he got elected a second time when under his constitution he was not allowed. An incumbent in under Salvadoran constitution is not allowed to contest a second time, but he did. He wanted some laws passed. His opposition only has 6 members in the Congress. He has the rest. He sent his troops into the Congress to have those laws passed. He declared an emergency in his country, or what he calls in his country, he calls a state of exception. That state of exception can be issued for 60 days. He has, however, got it going for 3 years, because every 60 days he takes an extension. So he's given it 34 extensions. His jails are full of people. His jails on a per capita basis or per lakh population basis, per 100,000 population basis, has the highest number of prisoners, highest number of people in jail. Almost all of them are unconvicted. Almost all of them are under trial. Almost all of them don't know what the charges are against them. Almost all of them do not have any rights to know the charges against them, or to have access to a lawyer, or even to visits from their families. That is the leader that Donald Trump really loves. Even at his inauguration, we saw Nayib Bukele present. Even before that, he had come to the conservative political convention, and he was seen as a big star and a hero there. He is seen by the American right, Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson has said, Tucker Carlson is the big podcaster. He has said that he's somebody who will save the world. He's the dream. He's the dream of the new right in the Western world. Or let me just say, in the Western hemisphere. Because Nayib Bukele says that he has made his country, which had probably the largest per capita murder rate, or per lakh population, per million population murder rate in the world, he's made it almost murder free. So the murder rate there is back to what Financial Times describes as comparable to the murder rate in Canada, which is very, very low. How has he done it? He's just done it by putting a lot of people in jail. So even at his press conference, the customary exchange with the White House press, he was asked about jailing people and he used his favorite line. He said, yes, I'm accused of jailing thousands of people, but in the process, I freed up the millions. He got elected in 2024 for his second term with almost 80% vote. His current popularity rating is about 90%. I'd like to see the remaining 10%, what happens to them. His imprisonment rate, I told you what it is. The important thing is, and why this is relevant right now in the US and Trump context, is that he is willing, just as we say, willing to lend his good offices. He's willing to lend his bad prisons for the American cause. So basically, he's telling the Americans, he's telling Trump administration that all the bad guys or all those you think are bad guys or all those who you think are illegal migrants, immigrants into your country, you round them up, you give them to me, I have place to jail them. Of course, he's not doing it for free. He's being paid for this. So the US sent a few hundred of their uh, detainees to him. They said these were hardened criminals and members of triads and gangs. Gangs are MS-13, Barrios. There's also an infamous Venezuelan gang, Trendy Aragua. So Trump administration claims that these are all members of these gangs who've been sent to El Salvador. They've been sent to El Salvador because they say El Salvador has the toughest prisons. The toughest prisons where all prisoners, they are packed together. El Salvador runs the biggest prisons anywhere in Central America. In fact, now they claim that one of their prisons is the biggest prison, largest prison anywhere in America. There the prisoner speaks on metal bunks with no mattresses, nothing. No mattress, no sheet, nothing. They only get an hour in the day to exercise. The prisons are lit, brightly lit, all 24 hours, which is also a kind of torture. And also, these prisoners are made to work very hard, to put in hard labor. To that extent, if the Americans can transfer prisoners who they cannot convict in their legal system, they are prisoners who they cannot convict in their legal system or who they do not want to go through the trouble of convicting in their legal system because then the lawyers come in and the judges have a view. Just ship them en masse to El Salvador into these prisons to never come out because many people in these prisons have been there for a very long time and almost nobody has seen any trial as yet. So to that extent, what Bukele is doing is offering America, Trump's America, a new Guantanamo Bay, a new Gitmo, which Americans don't have to maintain. Because if Americans have to maintain, it's more expensive. Americans have to keep their security there. And also, even in Guantanamo Bay, prisoners have certain rights. They have access to lawyers, and again, military lawyers come in, military judges come in, and they also raise questions about their treatment, torture, etc. All of this can be outsourced. So if you talk about outsourcing, and the word is that Trump administration or American right is not so happy with outsourcing of jobs or manufacturing, etc. In this case, jailing, jailing without trial, and torture is being outsourced to this young leader's small country. I told you how small. Country is so small that sometimes it's called Tom Thumb of Central America. If you know the story of Tom Thumb, these days it might be politically incorrect as well. But it's a very tiny country with Guatemala on one side, Honduras on the other. Both of those countries, Guatemala and Honduras, are big contributors to immigration into the US, mostly illegal immigration, as is Venezuela, not far away, Colombia. El Salvador has also been in that category. In fact, there was a period because El Salvador had civil war between 1979 and 1992, usual civil war, the usual story, and Americans supported junta in power in El Salvador, fighting with Soviet and Soviet bloc supported left guerrillas at the other end. That settled in 1992, and in the course of time, El Salvador became a democracy. However, it continued to have a very high lawlessness rate. And it is because of that that they finally chose this young man, this young leader who was the son. He was the son of a business family, well-to-do. Then he got elected mayor of San Salvador, the capital of the country, which was ridden with crime. In fact, gangs held control to various parts of the city. Even a local resident had to show their identity cards to different kinds of triad groups or gangsters. He finished the gangsters in the course of time, and that has given him such high popularity. In many ways, that's what Donald Trump and people around him also fantasize about, because at his inauguration last year, Donald Trump Jr. had gone. If you see Elon Musk, he's been praising Nayib Bukele all the time, as did Marco Rubio, American current chief of Homeland Security, Christy Noem. See, she posed in front of one of these prisons with inmates behind her. All these inmates, as they are brought in, they are immediately shaved. This is really dehumanizing, can be. However, he's offered these services to Donald Trump. He's also in the headlines now because of one particular Salvadoran. He's a Salvadoran citizen. However, he's a big story in America because he was living in America. He is Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Now, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, if you've been following the press lately, the international press, he was mistakenly picked up by the American authorities and externed and shipped to El Salvador on the suspicion that he was member of a gang called MS-13. Now, as his lawyers reached the federal judge said that they had no evidence that he was member of this gang, except that somebody saw some tattoos on his arms. So right now it looks like if you have tattoos, in fact in El Salvador, people are arrested for the simple reason that they have tattoos on the suspicion that they are members of one gang or the other. That is enough. There is a story I read in The Atlantic of a young woman who had gone out with her boyfriend. The boyfriend got picked up just because he had tattoos, and she's not seen that boyfriend again after that. So this man was also picked up in America. This is not in El Salvador. He was picked up in America. He was taken to El Salvador and immediately consigned to one of these prisons that I will tell you about a little bit about as we go along. Now, in his case, the federal judge ordered that he was wrongly detained and externed and sent to El Salvador. He should be brought back by a certain hour the next day. The US government went to Supreme Court saying that, look, this is now a diplomatic issue because he's not in our custody, he's in another country's custody. He's also the citizen of another country. So how can our court have jurisdiction over another country? And how can our court interfere in diplomatic relations? So now it's for the other country. What can we do? We'll try whatever, but we can't bring him back. They didn't assert that he's a member of a gang, but they said we can't bring him back because he's under El Salvadoran custody. Now that's become a big issue in America because will Trump administration, Department of Justice now defy the courts in America? This has become a test case, and it's very important because if they are able to do it once, they will do it again and again and again, and they will do it with bigger cases, even bigger cases like that. That's why Nayib Bukele's visit was perfectly timed from Donald Trump's point of view, because things that he wants to say, or he wants Marco Rubio to say, now he got Nayib Bukele to say. So Nayib Bukele is sitting with him. Nayib Bukele is telling Donald Trump, everybody goes to flatter Donald Trump. Some do it better than the others. Nayib Bukele was probably the best of the lot that I've seen so far. He said to Trump, you have the opportunity to liberate 350 million people. That is 35 crore people, approximately the population of America. And how does he do it? Obviously, Trump was like this when he heard this, that he's a great liberator. How you can do it is by just jailing a lot of people. See, I jailed a few thousand people. At last count, I think about 107,000 on a population base of 6.3 million, 63 lakh people, which means 3 out of every 100 adult males in El Salvador are in prison. I will give you comparative numbers for prisoners per 100,000 people for other countries also in just a minute. So he says, just jail a few tens of thousands of people and the rest will get the message and they will behave themselves and your crime will end. Our country was the murder capital of the Americas, in fact, murder capital in some ways of the whole world. We made it the safest country in the Western Hemisphere. That's the method I have followed. And you can see as he's saying it, Trump is so happy because that's what Trump wants to hear. Obviously, he cannot do most of it, but that's what he wants to hear. So listen to what Nayib Bukele said when Caitlin Collins of CNN, the usual suspect from Trump administration's point of view, they let her be there, and it's to her credit that she asks all the hard questions that she need to and also persists with them. So she asked Nayib Bukele the same question about Kilmar Abrego Garcia, that are you going to send him back to America? That's what the courts have ordered in America. So see what Bukele says. Well, I suppose you aren't suggesting that I smuggle a terrorist into the US, right? Or what do I do? Of course, I'm not going to do it. And then he goes on to call the question preposterous. He says the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist to the US? Now, nobody has any evidence. Nobody has shown any evidence that this man is a terrorist. So he says, how can I smuggle a terrorist to the US? I don't have the power to return him to the US. And he says, and I quote, I mean, we are not very fond of releasing terrorists into our country. We just turned the murder capital of the world into the safest country of the Western Hemisphere. And you want us to go back to releasing criminals so we can go back to being the murder capital of the world? No such thing will happen. Once again, there's been no due process. But don't teach due process to Nayib Bukele, because it's because he finished due process that a lot of the aspiring strongmen and dictators love him so much, because vicariously they all want to live out his life. Now let's learn about El Salvador a little bit. I told you about the size of the country, about the population. It's a poor country by the standards of Western Hemisphere, but not so poor, not as much of a third world as many of the countries in Asia and Africa. Its per capita income is still about $6,000, 5,893 at last count, which is not bad, which is more than twice as much as India's per capita income and higher than that of any country in our subcontinent or around it. So not that poor a country. At the same time, because it's had a history of civil war for such a long time, also a very limited economy. It has a big Pacific coastline, so it's now becoming a big surfing paradise, also because law and order is improved. But for a long time, when law and order was bad, tourists were not able to come there, and that led to economic decline, and that also led to combination of civil war as well as struggling economy, also led to a lot of Salvadorans going to America. And that's why Salvadorans, for a tiny population, constitute the sixth largest group of immigrants in America, legal or illegal. Now, I told you early on that Salvador has the world record, holds the world record. I would say the dubious world record, but right now it seems to be celebrated by Trump administration of having the highest number of prisoners per 100,000 people, 100,000 million, whatever you want to call it. So in case of El Salvador, it's 1,659 per lakh. The most powerful democracy in the world, America, 531. That is at number 6. India fortunately doesn't even feature anywhere there. In America, at this point, there are 1.76 million. That is 17 lakh 60,000 people in America's prisons. And while America's Bureau of Prisons says that they don't need any more prison space, because Trump now says that he's going to jail a lot more people and detain a lot more people on charges of being illegal immigrants. America's unique enterprise is private prisons. So private prisons which are serially either stopped. Democrats come to power, they stop private prisons. Republicans, Trump in particular, comes to power, they restore private prisons. So the two private prison companies are licking their chops because they think they may not get convicts or under trials, but they will be able to house hundreds of thousands of these immigrants who are now detained for being allegedly illegal. The two companies I will tell you about, the Geo Group and Core Civic. These are the two largest companies holding private prisons in the US. And from what I understand, they get paid by the number of nights. These are like hotels, number of nights that prisoners spent in their jails or their quote-unquote facilities, as the Americans like to describe everything. The shares of Geo Group have gone up 105% since Trump came to power. and shares of Core Civic, the other company, have gone up 50% since Trump came to power. In both of these top fund groups have shareholding. In fact, BlackRock is the largest single shareholder in both of these companies. BlackRock owns 14.16% of Geo Group and 16.75% of Core Civic. Another fund, Vanguard, owns 9.96% of Geo Group and 11.7% of Core Civic. So these prisons also are seeing a lot of business coming up. However, they have competition. That competition comes from Nayib Bukele. Now, Nayib Bukele is unconventional in many ways. He's young. He became president for his first 5-year term at the age of 37. Right? He's only 43 now, second year into his second term. He, in his country, dollar is the official currency, but he also made Bitcoin official currency. So Bitcoin can also be used. And that's also one more reason why the Trumpians love him so much. Besides this, he's a Twitter star, or what might be called X star. In fact, when you call somebody an X star, you flinch just a little bit because X is usually applied for something else. When you say X star or double X star, it applies to something else. But okay, he's an X star or Twitter star, and he speaks a lot there. A lot of what he speaks there is in English. So you can see that he's addressing an international audience, particularly an American audience. He's lately said, one of his tweets, "Our country is an example to the world of peace, confidence, and optimism. Nobody can deny it." Because last year, El Salvador saw its lowest murder rate ever in its history. Also, in the process, IMF has sanctioned a big loan to him for a small country like that, 1.4 billion. On the strength of that, he can raise more money. So he's saying, although his economy is only growing at 3%, but he's thinking that on the base of this, he can build his economy even further. Plus, he's now got support from Donald Trump and payouts for housing America's prisoners, or people America doesn't want. Now, look at how he describes himself. He describes himself as a philosopher king on his Twitter page, philosopher king, but he also says, "I'm the coolest dictator in the world," right? He has no problem. That's a young, in your face guy. And again, if you see his Twitter account, his country's population, including babies, bachas, buddhas, everybody, is only 6.2 to 6.3 million. This means he's got a lot of followers in the US as well. And he does a lot of his diplomacy and a lot of his politics through Twitter. That's why I told you earlier, Tucker Carlson said he may have the blueprint for saving the world. Now, Tucker Carlson, when he speaks, you know that he's speaking for the hardest side of MAGA and the Trumpians. And that is why he's lionized so much in Washington and the White House right now. I'll tell you something about his jail. So he's got this mega jail. One of the biggest is in a city called Tecoluca. So Tecoluca has 18,000 prisoners right now, but he can jail a lot more there. How did he start this jailing process? 2022, by 2022, although he had got elected earlier in his first term, first he tried to buy peace with the gangs. He tried to buy peace with the gangs, let them do some stuff, gave them something, let them do their stuff. They could do their immigrant running business. They could do some drug business into America, etc., etc. As long as they were of no trouble to him in his capital, that is San Salvador. He was trying to clean up his capital first, and he was in touch with them a lot. So one day in August 22, the top leadership of MS-13, the most important Salvadoran group, was coming to meet him. As they were coming to meet him ceremonially, as they routinely did, they were arrested. As they were arrested, initially the government said, "Oh, some crazy minister has got it done, don't worry about it." But then the gang realized that this was for real, and the gang went nuts, and the gang was armed. So they went around shooting people. In 24 hours, 87 people, almost all innocent and unsuspecting, were killed. He used that massacre as an excuse, or his reason, whatever you want to call it, to declare a state of exception, which in Salvador's case is a state of emergency. And in the state of exception, anybody can be arrested, and anybody who was arrested has no right to any lawyers, any defense, or no right even to have their charges read out to them, or any family visits. All of these arrests, most of these arrests now, global human rights organizations have looked at them. Almost all of these arrests are not on any specific charge. They are on a charge called conspiracy. Conspiracy with whom, conspiring with whom, it doesn't matter. They are just in jail and will probably never come out if Nayib Bukele had his way, because for him, keeping prisoner keeping prisoners in jail is part of his crime control process. That as long as I keep these people in jail, and these are really bad jails, others will know not to mess with my system. So one of his quotes, he said, people talk of human rights for prisoners, but what rights have you got when you are dead? Right? So that is how he's selling it to his population. It continues to be very popular. These prisons are called CCOT, CECOT, Center for Confinement of Terrorists. They are not even called prisons in the normal course. Now, does he ever have anybody questioning him? So he was questioned by a man called Alejandro. If I pronounce his second name right, I will try. Alejandro Moishont, Muyshondt. If this is wrong, somebody please correct me. Alejandro Moishont. He was former national security advisor to Bukele. He questioned him, and more than him, his aides, his other aides, and he said they were indulging in corruption and drug trafficking. He was arrested the day after. 20 cops came to his home, took him away. He took him away. A few days later, the government said he was leaking secrets, again on Twitter. He was leaking secrets to a foreign power for whom he was a double agent. They didn't say which foreign power. For 6 months, there was no sight of him. His family kept searching for him. He was, until recently, his national security advisor. Then the police put out a Twitter statement saying that he had suffered 3 brain hemorrhages while undergoing surgery for metastasizing brain cancers, right? The family got the body, they found the head and the heart all cut up and crudely stitched. They said as if by a shoemaker. There were puncture wounds all over his body. His nose was broken, his wrists were broken, his feet were broken, and you could see that in his head, it looks like he had gone through 8 to 10 surgeries in his head. In Salvadoran politics, you ask people questions, and again I'm reading from international media. Why do people say, people are asked, why do you like him so much if he's doing all these awful things? They say that our country was in a complete mess. It was held to ransom by criminal gangs. What they needed was la mano dura. La mano dura is Spanish, I suspect. La mano dura is Spanish, it seems, for an iron fist. And Bukele has given them the iron fist, and that's why they are a normal country. So he set up one surf city, which is a beach city, and now he's connecting the beaches and setting up a second surf city. And he's saying my country is safe for tourists, so tourism also becomes one more source of revenue for him. Now I know after hearing all this, one question must be assailing your mind, that if these countries have such a percentage of their population in jails, or so many prisoners in jail, America has 17,60,000. America has 4% of the world's population, but 20% of the world's prisoners, right? So America is really a champion there. How is India doing? India has at least 4 times, more than 4 times America's population, and yet India has 5,76,000 people in jail. That's 1/3 of the people in American jails. And again, that's something we'll talk about later. A lot of people in Indian jails are also under trials and not convicts, but that's a discussion for another day.